Maplewood, Oregon. A town where time seems to move slower than the rest of the world. A quiet place, small, gentle, surrounded by pine forests where every autumn paints the main road leading to Greenfield Elementary in shades of gold. There, a 7-year-old girl named Emma Collins once walked to school every day, her pink backpack bouncing against her shoulders, her smile brighter than the morning sun. But on one Friday afternoon, October 12, 2018, that smile disappeared. That Friday, the air over Maplewood carried the first chill of autumn. By 3 o'clock, the final bell at Greenfield Elementary rang across the schoolyard, and children poured through the gates, laughter echoing down the narrow street that cut through the center of town. Among them was Emma Collins. Teachers would later remember her as the kind of child who never rushed. She lingered at the gate that afternoon, a small figure in a red coat, her pink backpack nearly half her size, waiting, as she always did, for her father's car to appear around the corner. But that day he was running late, and in those few minutes something happened that no one in Maplewood would ever forget. One of her classmates, a boy named Ethan Moore, told investigators he saw Emma speaking with someone, a tall figure, wearing a long dark coat. The hood was drawn tight, hiding their face completely. Ethan couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, only that the person stood still, hands tucked inside the coat, as if waiting. They spoke for less than a minute. Then the door of a black SUV opened. Emma stepped closer, and just like that, they were gone. No one saw her get inside the car. No one saw which direction it went. At 2:38 p.m., her father arrived. He parked by the curb, called her name, and walked the length of the sidewalk twice. The gate stood open. Emma's drawings were still tucked under her chair inside the classroom. Her jacket was gone. And by the time the school realized something was wrong, 15 minutes had already passed. In a small town like Maplewood, 15 minutes can change everything. That night, search teams gathered. Flashlights cut through the woods behind the school. Neighbors opened their barns and basements, but there was no sign of the little girl with the pink backpack. Police brought in dogs. They followed a faint scent trail down Maple Street, past the general store, and into a stretch of road where the town's only surveillance camera had been broken for nearly 2 weeks. The trail ended there. From that moment on, the Maplewood disappearance became one of Oregon's most haunting cold cases, a mystery that still divides the town to this day. Night fell over Maplewood like a heavy curtain. By 7 o'clock, the quiet town had turned into a grid of flashlight beams cutting through the woods. Officers from the county sheriff's department marked search zones on a map pinned against the hood of a patrol car. Volunteers, parents, teachers, neighbors spread out in every direction. The temperature dropped fast that night. People called her name into the dark. "Emma! Emma Collins!" But the only thing that answered was the wind, whispering through the pine trees. At 9:14 p.m., the search was officially classified as a missing child emergency. The following morning, the investigation began. Detective Alan Reeves, who had been with the Maple County Sheriff's Office for 17 years, was the first to take lead. He later described the scene in his notes. The child disappeared within a 300-foot radius in broad daylight during dismissal hour. That's not random. Someone planned this. Detectives started with the obvious: Emma's father, David Collins. David had arrived at 3:28 p.m., exactly 10 minutes after the last confirmed sighting of his daughter. He'd driven straight from work in Portland, where coworkers confirmed he clocked out at 2:45. The drive should have taken 40 minutes, and it did. When investigators searched his vehicle, they found flyers, art supplies, a car seat, a pink hair clip in the glove compartment, but nothing else. He wasn't hiding anything. He was just broken. In his interview, recorded at 11:03 p.m., David's voice barely rose above a whisper. "She always waits by the gate. She knows I'll come. I was late once, just once, and now she's gone." The next 48 hours turned into a blur of tips, false leads, and dead ends. Someone reported seeing a black SUV heading north out of town around 3:30. Another said they saw it parked by the gas station, engine running, but the station's camera had been turned off for maintenance. That same day, a woman found a child's hair ribbon tangled in a fence near the West Trailhead. It was pink, but not Emma's. Every piece of hope fell apart under forensic testing. By Sunday evening, the search radius had widened to 5 miles. A helicopter scanned the tree line. Thermal drones swept the hills behind Greenfield Elementary. Nothing. It was as if the earth had swallowed her. Then came the first real lead. Monday morning, 9:17 p.m., a store owner along Maple Street reviewed his security footage. The timestamp read 3:22 p.m. In the far corner of the frame, just before the camera lost signal, a black SUV passed by, slow, deliberate. But what caught the detective's eye wasn't the car. It was the shadow in the passenger window. A small silhouette. They couldn't make out the face, but it was the right size for a child. When Detective Reeves later reviewed the footage, he paused the frame and whispered to himself, "That's her." But the license plate was fake. It was a dead end. Again. And just like that, the first 48 hours, the most critical window in any missing child case, closed with nothing but silence. By the third day, Maplewood no longer felt like Maplewood. News vans lined the main street. Reporters gathered outside the small white building of the sheriff's office, their cameras aimed at a single door, waiting for a suspect, a confession, a headline. But there was none. The case had gone from missing person to possible abduction. And when there are no suspects, the spotlight always finds the family. David Collins became that spotlight's target. On the surface, he was the grieving father, but the media saw something else: an ex-husband, a man with a temper, and a custody battle that had ended badly. They dug up old court records. The words "domestic dispute" began showing up in headlines. Was the Maplewood father hiding something? A violent past, a missing child, coincidence or cover-up? Within a week, the town had chosen its villain. Detectives brought David in again, this time to the county headquarters in Portland. 8 hours of questioning. 8 hours of reliving the same 15 minutes he wished he could undo. Did you argue with your ex-wife the night before? Did you ever threaten to take your daughter away? Did you know she planned to move to another state? David's answers never changed. No, I just wanted to see my daughter. But no matter how many times he spoke, the whispers grew louder. He stopped leaving the house. His mailbox filled with letters, some with prayers, others with hate. One morning, he woke up to find the words, "Where's Emma?" spray-painted across his fence. By then, even his closest friends didn't know what to say. Across town, though, someone else was finding their voice: Laura Collins, Emma's mother. She began appearing on television, in interviews, standing in front of cameras with trembling hands and tear-streaked eyes. "Please, if you know anything about my daughter, I'm begging you, call the police." Her grief was raw, real. A charity fund was created in her daughter's name, the Emma Collins Search Foundation. Donations poured in from across the state. Laura became a symbol, the face of loss and endurance. Reporters followed her everywhere. At first, she spoke only about Emma. Then, slowly, her words shifted. "I just wish David had listened. I told him someone was watching us." That single sentence sent the investigation spinning again. Detectives reopened Laura's statements from the first day. They noticed inconsistencies, small ones, but enough. She had told one officer she was at work all afternoon. Another report said she was home, preparing dinner. When asked about her car's mileage, she said she hadn't left Maplewood for weeks. But her GPS data showed a route logged to the next county just days before Emma vanished. Still, there was nothing concrete. Laura's public image, the grieving mother, protected her from scrutiny. And so, the investigation slowed, again. By late November, it was quietly moved to the Cold Case Division of the Oregon State Bureau. Emma Collins had been missing for 47 days. Christmas lights appeared on the houses around Greenfield Elementary that winter. But one house, the Collins residence, stayed dark.
Inside, David kept the same chair by the window, the same photo on the table. Every night he looked out at the falling snow and whispered her name, Emma. Somewhere out there, in the quiet forests of Oregon, a little girl was missing. And no one knew that the truth was much closer than they thought. 3 years passed. Maplewood moved on, or at least it tried to. The playground near Greenfield Elementary was rebuilt. New families moved in. For the rest of the town, Emma Collins became a face on a fading poster. But for her father, time didn't pass, it froze. David still lived in the same small house on Willow Creek Road, surrounded by boxes of newspaper clippings and police reports. He no longer spoke to anyone from the investigation. He didn't trust the police or the press, not after what they'd done to him. Then, one quiet evening in March 1983, his phone rang. The voice on the other end was shaky, uncertain, but clear. "Is this Mr. Collins?" "Yes." I think I saw your daughter." Her name was Sarah Miller, a college student studying photography in Portland. She said she'd been driving through Jefferson County, about 2 hours east of Maplewood, when she stopped for gas near an old highway diner. Outside, she noticed a woman in a gray hooded coat getting into a pickup truck, and next to her, a young girl. Sarah only looked for a few seconds, but something about the girl's face stayed with her. When she got home, the memory wouldn't fade. She searched online, found a photo of Emma Collins, and froze. It was the same eyes. Detectives from the Cold Case Division were dispatched the next morning. They found the diner, still standing, still run by the same owner, Bill Harper. When they showed him Emma's picture, he nodded slowly. "Yeah, that girl. Came in with a woman, didn't talk much, always wore a hat. I remember 'cause the woman never let her pay, never let her go anywhere alone." The date matched Sarah's description exactly. The woman had paid in cash. No license plate was recorded. But there was something else. Bill pointed to the security camera above the counter. An old VHS system, grainy, low resolution, barely working, yet it was enough. Investigators spent 2 days restoring the footage. What they found would reopen the case. The video showed a woman in a long gray coat, hood pulled up. She turned just slightly toward the camera. Her face was blurry, almost hidden, but one thing stood out: her walk. Slow, careful, with a slight limp in her left leg. Detectives who had worked the original case noticed it immediately. Laura Collins, Emma's mother, had once injured her left knee in a skiing accident. They couldn't prove it yet, but they had something they hadn't had in years: a direction. Warrants were issued. Laura's financials were quietly reviewed. And beneath the layers of charity donations and public sympathy, something didn't add up. The foundation funds, the ones meant for search operations, had been drained almost completely, withdrawn in small amounts across several states. Then came the final break. In late April 1983, a rental cabin manager in rural Crook County reported something strange: an abandoned unit. Inside, children's clothing, empty food cans, a photograph of a woman and a girl half burned in the fireplace. The woman's face was turned away, but the girl was unmistakable.
Emma Collins. It took only 48 hours for the FBI to locate Laura Collins. She was living under a false name in a small town outside Bend, Oregon. When agents arrived, she didn't resist. She simply said one thing: "I didn't take her, I saved her." And just like that, after 3 long years, the mystery of Maplewood began to unravel. In the first hours after her arrest, Laura Collins said almost nothing. She sat inside the small interview room at the Bend County Sheriff's Office, silent, unmoving, her eyes fixed on the floor. When she finally spoke, her words were simple: "I didn't take her, I saved her." For investigators, it was the same line that had haunted the case for years. But this time, they had something they didn't have before: evidence. In the abandoned cabin, forensic teams recovered Emma's school ID card, a pink hair tie, and traces of Laura's fingerprints across every surface. In a drawer near the fireplace, detectives found a notebook, its first pages filled with Emma's handwriting. The last few were written by Laura. The entries detailed their movements after October 12th, a list of small towns, motels, and gas stations across 3 states. There was no mention of abuse, no signs of fear, only one repeating phrase: "He'll never find us." When confronted with the notebook, Laura broke down. She admitted she had planned the abduction weeks before, that she'd borrowed a friend's SUV, withdrawn cash, and chosen back roads to avoid cameras. "I thought he'd take her away from me," she said. "I couldn't let that happen." Investigators confirmed that no complaint or domestic report had ever been filed against David Collins. The so-called caseworker Laura mentioned never existed. Everything, the fear, the story, the running, had been built on her own desperation. When the truth came out, David arrived at the station just after midnight. He didn't wait for permission. The moment the door opened and he saw Emma standing there, thinner, older, frightened, he ran to her. He dropped to his knees and pulled her into his arms, sobbing, whispering her name over and over. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The room was silent, except for the sound of a father holding his daughter again, after 3 years of searching in the dark. Laura Collins was sentenced to 12 years in prison for child abduction and falsifying evidence. She never appealed. In a letter written from custody, she said only this: "Maybe someday she'll understand. Everything I did was for her." David and Emma returned to Maplewood. He left his old job, sold his car, and focused on rebuilding the small, quiet life that had once been theirs. Locals say they sometimes see them walking together down the same tree-lined road that leads to Greenfield Elementary. A man and a little girl, hand in hand, both learning how to start again. The Maplewood case is closed, But for those who remember it, the story lingers not as a mystery of what was lost, but as a reminder of what was found.
The investigation files. In the months that followed Laura Collins' arrest, detectives from the Oregon State Police compiled more than 2,000 pages of reports, statements, and forensic records. Every mile of the route Laura drove was reconstructed, from the school parking lot in Maplewood to the cabin deep in the Deschutes forest. Investigators confirmed that she had used a prepaid burner phone purchased under a false name and that she'd withdrawn nearly $38,000 in cash from multiple ATMs in the days before the abduction. Surveillance footage showed her buying food, clothing, and camping supplies, always alone. The SUV used in the kidnapping was traced to a former co-worker who told police Laura had borrowed it for a weekend trip with her daughter. He was later cleared of any involvement. Psychological evaluations described Laura Collins as highly intelligent, methodical, and emotionally unstable following her divorce. She had been prescribed antidepressants 6 months before Emma's disappearance, but had stopped taking them weeks prior to October 12th. The final report concluded that her actions were premeditated, but not malicious, driven by delusion, not hatred. Quote, "She wasn't trying to harm her child. She was trying to erase her own fear of losing her." Unquote. Emma Collins was placed under psychological care for nearly a year after being found. Her doctors described her as quiet, gentle, and highly perceptive. She struggled with night terrors and periods of silence, but slowly began to heal. She never testified in court. By the time the trial began, she was living again with her father in Maplewood. 3 years later, the Oregon Bureau of Investigation officially marked the case as closed, resolved. But within the department, the Maplewood file remains something of a cautionary tale, not about stranger danger, but about how far a parent's fear can go when love turns into possession. As one detective later told a reporter, quote, "We always imagine the monster outside the house, and sometimes it's the one that built the house itself." Unquote. And that is how the story of a missing child, a 7-year-old girl with a pink backpack, became one of Oregon's most haunting cases of love, fear, and silence. This is The Maplewood Disappearance, a story about a father's faith, a mother's obsession, and a small town that learned how even the quietest streets can hide the darkest secrets. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you again in the next videos. Please subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more exciting videos coming soon.